This is Yara, once a paradise, now a stage for chaos. A nation trapped under the iron fist of a dictator whose vision of greatness is measured in fear, oppression, and propaganda. Far Cry 6 promises revolution, freedom, and moral choices, but underneath the explosions, the guerrilla warfare, and the cinematic cutscenes, is there substance, or are we playing yet another sandbox precisely dressed up to look like something more than it is? Welcome to Far Cry 6. Let's begin with the story, because this is where Far Cry 6 really sets itself up to be something special, but where it also starts stumbling over its own feet. On paper, the setup is incredible. You've got Gustavo Fring. Anton Castillo, president of Yara, is played by the legendary Giancarlo Esposito, and he's running Yara with an iron fist. He's preparing his son Diego to take over, and the whole country is basically burning under his control. That's a strong pitch. It's cinematic, it's political, it's personal. The ingredients are all there for an incredible narrative. And Castillo himself, when he's there, easily one of the best parts of the game. Every time he's on screen, the tone shifts. The man doesn't need to scream, doesn't need to cackle like a cartoon villain, he just exists. And you're already uncomfortable. His calm, calculated delivery and the way he manipulates those around him makes him genuinely terrifying. He's magnetic and gives the story its most compelling moments. The problem is, once Castillo leaves the screen, things get shakier. You play as Danny Rojas, and here's where I'm mixed. On one hand, Danny's actually voiced this time, which is a step up from being a mute protagonist. That gives him at least a shred of personality. But on the other hand, Danny still feels more like a vessel than a character. The story tries to sell you on his transformation from a regular person just trying to escape Yara into a full-blown revolutionary leader, but it never really lands. It's more told than shown. You don't get those deep personal arcs or relationships that makes you invest in him. He's fine, but he's just fine. And fine doesn't cut it when the story is trying to be about revolution, sacrifice, and freedom. The supporting cast has its moments though. Some of the side characters bring a lot of energy and charm to the narrative. Clara, your rebel leader, actually has some weight to her role, and characters like Juan, the grizzled guerrilla mentor, inject humour and personality into scenes that desperately need it. But just like the story itself, they're inconsistent. For every interesting character, there are two NPCs who feel like they were pulled straight from Ubisoft's generic rebel character template. It's uneven and it makes the story feel disjointed. Now let's talk pacing, because this is where the cracks really show. The story wants to hit you with heavy themes: dictatorship, propaganda, oppression, and it does. But then, it constantly undercuts itself with filler. It will go from a dramatic cutscene with Castillo, when he's outlining his terrifying vision for Yara, straight into a side mission where some random villager asks you to collect roosters. And look, I'm all for some weird stupid side content in an open world game, but when you shove it right next to a story about human suffering and revolution, the tone just collapses. It's hard to take the narrative seriously when the game itself doesn't commit to it. Another issue is consequence, or really, the lack of it. Ubisoft wants you to believe you're part of this revolution that's changing Yara forever. You liberate towns, you burn fields, you kill high-ranking officers. The visuals change, flags swap, people cheer, but nothing feels different. Civilians go back to their routines, Castillo's propaganda still blares everywhere, and the world doesn't really react. It's like the game is saying, hey, you did a thing, good job, and then it resets itself. Compare that to something like Far Cry 3, where Vaas's presence was suffocating and personal. You felt that conflict everywhere you went. Here, it feels like progress bars filling up on a checklist. But it wasn't all bad, because there were moments where Far Cry 6 did a decent job. There are cutscenes with Castillo that are genuinely chilling. There are missions that put you in uncomfortable situations where you have to make choices that feel morally grey. And there are times when the story does let you soak in the gravity of fighting for freedom. These moments prove that Far Cry 6 had the potential to tell a truly great story. The problem is, those highs are surrounded by a lot of filler and repetition. Let's step aside for a moment, because we need to talk about the elephant in the room and the problems within the story. Far Cry 6's story isn't just flawed, it's recycled. And I don't mean the generic evil dictator versus rebel setup. I mean Ubisoft has been running the same formula through the blender for so many games that you can literally point to moments in Far Cry 6 and go, yeah, that's from Far Cry 3, that's from Far Cry 4, that's from Far Cry 1. It starts to feel less like a bold new entry and more like a greatest hits compilation, except the songs don't hit as hard as they used to. Take Anton Castillo for example. This guy's the face of the game, plastered across trailers, posters, box art, you name it. Ubisoft clearly wanted him to be the next Vars or Pagan Min, someone unforgettable, but in practice, he's barely in the game. His involvement is shockingly minimal. You'll see him in these beautifully acted cutscenes, but they're more like filler scenarios than actual story-driven moments. He doesn't confront you often, doesn't interact with you meaningfully, and doesn't leave his fingerprints on the gameplay. Instead, the writers keep tossing in these random Anton lectures Diego scenes just so you don't forget he exists. It's like they realised the story was hollow without him, so they kept feeding you scraps of Esposito to keep the illusion alive. And then there's the formula. If you've played this game as the first Far Cry ever, you'd enjoy it. But if you've played literally any other Far Cry, you'll start noticing deja vu almost immediately. Your journey kicks off with the tragic death of a friend. That's basically the opening note of Far Cry 3 all over again. Later, you're briefly introduced to an insane doctor who says the words, "Do you know the definition of control?" many times. Sounds a lot like Vars' speech from Far Cry 3. Did I say an insane doctor? Sounds a lot like Far Cry 1. And if we're being brutally honest, the central theme of going up against a government or a ruling power, we've done this before too. Far Cry 2, warlords tearing a country apart. Far Cry 4, a dictator ruling without fear. Even Far Cry 5 had the same structure, it just swapped out a government for a cult. To give you a simple explanation of the story and missions in this game, there's a president, and your job is to go around the map and kill the president's best and closest workers. This is awfully similar to Far Cry 5's game, where you had to kill Joseph Seed's family before getting to him. Far Cry 6 doesn't expand or subvert any of these ideas. It just recycles them with the Caribbean paint job. The problem is, players notice. What was once shocking or compelling in earlier games now feels predictable. Like you're playing through Ubisoft's How to Make Far Cry story checklist. Now, let's talk gameplay. Because if the story is Far Cry 6's weakest link, the gameplay is the part that's supposed to save it. After all, this is an open world shooter. If blowing stuff up and taking over checkpoints isn't fun, then what's the point, right? And the truth is, yeah, Far Cry 6 is fun. The gameplay is tight, the world is huge, and the moment-to-moment chaos that the series is known for is definitely here. But just like the story, the cracks start showing once you realise how little has actually changed since the last 5 games. Let's start with the positives, because there are a few. The weapons feel great. Whether you're sneaking around with a suppressed rifle, or going full Rambo with a minigun, the shooting has that satisfying punch that Far Cry has always nailed. Then you've got the resolver weapons, which are basically cobbled together DIY death machines. Stuff like a flamethrower made from junk, or a backpack rocket launcher that can wipe out a tank in seconds. They're creative, they're ridiculous, and they fit the guerrilla warfare theme very well. It's a genuine highlight that gives Far Cry 6 its own flavour compared to the past entries. The world itself is also impressive in scale. Yara is massive, with jungles, cities, beaches, farmland, you name it. On the surface, it's gorgeous. The colours pop, the detail is there, and sometimes you just stop and take in the view. And when you're in the flow of combat, ambushing a convoy, setting traps, or unleashing chaos on an outpost, the game delivers those cinematic action movie moments that the series is built around. Explosions, gunfire, vehicles flipping over, it feels like you're in a blockbuster. But once that initial rush fades, the gameplay loop starts to feel old. Because let's be real, this is the exact same Far Cry loop we've been playing since 2012. Take over checkpoints, blow up propaganda, free prisoners, recruit rebels, rinse and repeat across a giant map until the game decides you've done enough to unlock the next cutscene. It's a Ubisoft formula we've seen 100 times before, and Far Cry 6 does nothing to reinvent it. Take Outposts for example. On paper, these should be some of the most exciting parts of the game. A little sandbox where you get to decide how to approach the objective, go loud, go stealth, maybe unleash a crocodile on the guards. And yeah, that's fun, the first dozen times. But when the map has done dozens of these outposts, all designed in pretty much the same way, it quickly becomes routine. You're not strategizing anymore, you're just going through the motions. Clear enemies, flip a switch, get a cutscene of rebels cheering, same outcome, different location. And let's talk about enemy variety, or more accurately, the lack of it. Far Cry 6 throws the same handful of soldier types at you over and over again. Regular guys with rifles, armoured guys with helmets, maybe the occasional flamethrower unit. After a while, combat stops being about creativity and starts being about muscle memory. Compare this to games like Far Cry 3, where the insanity of the characters and unpredictable wildlife made every encounter feel dangerous. In Far Cry 6, once you've learned the enemy types, you've basically solved the game. The side content doesn't fare much better. Sure, there are fishing minigames, treasure hunts and races, but none of it feels essential or rewarding. The only new addition I liked was cockfighting. That was actually pretty fun. But these games were distractions, not meaningful parts of the journey. And while the treasure hunts can be clever with environmental puzzles, they're still just filler in a game already drowning in busy work. It's the Ubisoft open world problem in full force. A giant map littered with icons, most of which don't matter. Let's address the supposed big innovations, the amigos and the gear system. The amigos are your animal companions. You can roll into battle with a crocodile, a panther, or even a tiny wiener dog named Chorizo. And yeah, they're cute, they're fun, and they add personality, but in practice, they're just gimmicks. After the novelty wears off, they're basically just AI tools to distract enemies while you do the real work. And the gear system? Honestly, it feels like Ubisoft forcing RPG mechanics into a game that doesn't need them. Instead of just picking the loadout you want, you're constantly swapping hats, shirts, and trousers for a tiny stat boost, like 10% more defense against fire damage. It's clunky, it slows down the action, and it doesn't add any real depth. And here's the thing, none of these problems are new. Far Cry has been recycling the same gameplay loop for years, and while it's mechanically solid, it's starting to feel dated. Other open world games have evolved, but Far Cry is just stuck with shinier graphics and a few new toys. It's like Ubisoft is terrified of changing the formula, even though it's long overdue for a shake-up. So, the verdict on gameplay? It's fun in short bursts, and there are flashes of brilliance with the resolver weapons, the amigos, and the chaotic combat, but it's also bloated, repetitive, and stuck in the past. Far Cry 6 doesn't build on the foundation of its predecessors. It just repackages it with a new coat of paint. If you're new to the series, you'll probably have a great time, but if you've been playing Far Cry since the early days, you'll see through the repetition almost immediately, and that's the biggest disappointment. This could have been the game to push the series forward, but instead, it feels like Ubisoft is running in circles. If there's one thing Ubisoft always nails, it's making a game look gorgeous in trailers, and Far Cry 6 is no exception. The first time you set foot into Yara, you feel alive. You've got sweeping beaches, dense jungles, bustling towns, and farmlands that stretch to the horizon. Sunsets paint the sky in golden red, storms roll in with sheets of rain, and if you stop for a second, the scenery can be breathtaking. On a surface level, this game looks like it delivers the ultimate guerrilla warfare playground. Then there's the wildlife, and this is where long-time Far Cry fans really feel the difference. In Far Cry 3, the jungle itself felt like an enemy. You'd be sneaking into an outpost, thinking you had the perfect stealth plan, and then boom, a tiger leaps out of nowhere and suddenly the whole place is on fire. Bullets flying everywhere. It was unpredictable, it was chaotic, and it made the world feel alive in a way few shooters have ever matched. The animals weren't just decoration, they were part of the gameplay, part of the danger, and part of what made the island terrifying and unforgettable. Far Cry 6 tries to bring that back, but it doesn't have the same bite. Sure, you've got crocodiles in the rivers, sharks in the oceans, jaguars prowling the jungles. On paper, it's a solid lineup, but in practice, it feels tamer, more scripted. You see the same ambushes play out in the same areas, the same animals spawning in predictable spots. The first time a crocodile lunges at you is cool. The 5th or 10th time, it's just another checkbox on Ubisoft's open world formula. The danger is gone. The tension is gone. And without that unpredictability, the wildlife becomes more of a background feature than a real force of nature. So, after everything, what's the verdict on Far Cry 6? Yara is gorgeous, chaotic, and full of fun moments, explosive combat, crazy resolver weapons, and Giancarlo Esposito absolutely steals the show as Anton Castillo. But for all the spectacle, the game never truly feels fresh. The story leans on recycled tropes, Anton's role is underused, and the world, while big and colourful, often feels hollow. Even the wildlife, which used to add real tension, is predictable and scripted. Far Cry 6 isn't a disaster, it's entertaining in bursts, and newcomers might enjoy it more than long-time fans. But at the end of the day, it's a safe, formulaic entry. For me, that lands a 6.5 out of 10. Fun, flashy, but ultimately somewhat forgettable. Yara is a playground, but it's one we've been to before. Just before I end the video, I've also watched back some of my old videos, and I've changed the ratings for Far Cry 1, now giving it a 6.3, and giving Far Cry 2 a 5.9. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time for Far Cry New Dawn to complete the series.